Good morning, everyone. My name, as you just met, my name is Rodney Whittenberg. I am the co-director of Angels and co-producer, composer, editor, a bunch of other things on Angels and Saints. And I'm also a lay preacher in the Universal Unitarian tradition. And start by telling just a little story. I preached on this about 2 weeks ago or a week and a half ago on Angels and Saints at my church, which is Wellspring UU. And so I started off by saying, so I was raised Catholic and I was what you would call as a child, a true believer. I mean, from the time I was aware of who Jesus was, I was like, I love this guy. He is so cool. And I was reading the Bible all the time every day. And I went to, I grew up in West Philly, the first part of my life. So I went to St. Francis de Sales. And then at around fourth grade, my parents made the really bad mistake of sending me to Catholic school. And I say it was a bad mistake because this is where the tension begins. So I would be in school and I remember what I would read in the Bible, and then I would sit in class and raise my hand. Yes, Mr. Whittenberg. Question. Oh boy. Yes. So Jesus rose on the third day, and the first person he goes to is Mary. And he says, go forth and tell them I have risen. And yes, that's yes. So how come Mary's not the most important apostle? Down to the office. Why? What did I do? So every Friday we had church. Mr. Wittenberg, where's your tie? Jesus didn't wear a tie. I don't have to wear a tie to come to church. It doesn't make any sense. Why is it so important about the tie? And as I got a little bit older, I started looking around going, this seems really strange. There's so much wealth in here and all this marble and stained glass. It says here Jesus was on a rock outside. So by this point, we had moved to the suburbs, and I got to the point where I said, oh, and I would go outside with the Bible and I would preach to the animals because I'm like, hear me outside. That makes perfect sense. This is where God is in nature with all these animals and everything. So my parents were looking out the window going, he's out of his mind. He's completely crazy. And in my bedroom, I had a little shrine. What did I have? It was the nativity, the birth. I think I had the scene, which doesn't get talked about, of him in the desert with the apostles, and then the crucifixion. And I had it all in this little box that was, and it was all made of clay. But right above it, I had the 4 pictures of the Beatles from the White House. But right about this time, I started beginning to have really questioning this whole Christianity thing. At the same time, though, in 5th grade, by the time we were in the suburbs, I would have the students who are struggling come at lunchtime and sit with me, and I would counsel them. And I don't know how I got away with this because I had a little Bible in my desk, and I would bring it out and go, what seems to be the problem? And then they would sit down. I was like, I thought I was a therapist. I mean, I always wanted to help people. But by the time I was 12, I told my mom, I cannot do this anymore. I can't go to this church. It's not working. And she was devastated because my mom was a devout Catholic and did rosaries every Wednesday, went to church 2 times a week. My dad was Baptist, so he's like, that's not really church. This is church. And I go to Baptist, I'm like, whoa, that's cool. A lot of music, but still, it wasn't quite, I always felt like there was a disconnect. So I decided to leave and go on a quest to find something that took me a long time. But the premise of our film and why I tell that story is, what if I decided to stay? And that is the case with the members that we interviewed in our film. And if you can show a picture of them up there, we interviewed 6 people who are of varying degree, identify across the gender and sex positive spectrum. And the goal of this, according to this guy right here who's sitting next to me, the whole point of all this is to find wholeness. It's to be a complete whole being. How can we be whole if we are taught that our soul is great, but our bodies are bad? Our mind is questionable, the soul's perfect, mind is questionable, body's bad. How can we incorporate all of that together? So the people we interviewed in the film decided to stay inside their faith, even though their faith was in some ways rejecting them. We have Rev Bev Dale, who is a sex positive feminist Episcopal, what is she?
Well, she's a pastor and a teacher.
Yeah. And then there is Rabbi David Bauer, who is out as being a gay rabbi, gay man, and two lesbian ministers, Lisette Cross. There is Chris Page, who is transgender, and Nick, who identifies as a polyamorous naturist, and M. House, who is a sex therapist, and also a member of my UU church. It's not my church, it's our church, so I shouldn't say it that way. So those are the people we reached out to. And our goal was, again, to find out how they came to wholeness, having their spiritual self, their physical self, and their mental self all come together, even though outside forces were pushing against what they knew to be true. For myself, as a kid, I knew that there was more to the spiritual realm than just the teachings that were in this 2,000-year-old book. And I kept feeling like, wow, the messages are still coming. And that, again, speaks to why we called the film Angels and Saints, Eris and All, because the angels and saints are still among us. They're still sending us messages. They're still, I mean, a little bit of a Salvador Dali is my favorite painter. We're going to talk a little bit. But I think in some ways he's a messenger. The song I'm going to play later, Angels and Saints, the title track for the movie, it's sort of an homage to David Bowie. I think he's another one of those messengers. There's so many of them that we get that we don't think of as spiritual messengers because they don't come in a robe or they're not flying around like angels or something like that, but they're there and the source is speaking through them. All we have to do is listen.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney. Rodney, why don't we show the clip of Chris Page and the poem?
So as I said, Chris is identifies as actually otherwise. I've said transgender, and you know, one of the things that I keep pointing out when I do public speaking, I sometimes stumble with this because it's opening up a vulnerability, but learning all the terms and the pronouns, I have them in my head, but it's hard to remember. And I do take it very seriously. I actually was thinking about thinking of it in relation to race and how when my parents were young, they were Negroes, and when I was born, I guess I was considered colored and black and now African American, and it's all very complicated, but it's also very serious because it's how we present ourselves in the world. And it's also tricky because everyone has a different way of thinking about it, that we're all on our own personal journey. Yeah. But here is a wonderful poem by Chris Page that speaks to everything that we're just talking about.
I am otherwise. I am male and female, neither, both. I've been given a non-binary gender, made in the image of an otherwise God, that's in Genesis, who transcends labels like, I am who I am. I am otherwise. I honor the courage and strength of my two spirit siblings, who struggle to reclaim their places in native circles, Winkte, Nedley, and more. I am otherwise. I acknowledge that it was settler colonists, invader immigrants from Europe who came with rigid and binary ideas about gender, enforcing those ideas on indigenous people in the Americas through violence and cultural genocide, labeling my two spirit siblings as evil and feeding them, literally, to the dogs of war. I am otherwise. Those European settler invaders were Christians funded by church people. The tools of gendered violence had already been used for many generations in the old country to eliminate the otherwise. gender nonconforming people as well as pagans, wise women, healers, and other so-called heretics and perverts who challenge the status quo. I am otherwise. I hear the voices of the slaughtered still crying out from those burning years, the genocide of my own tribe long before Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Demons unleashed again in the Middle Passage, residential schools, internment camps, and so many other places from Ferguson, Missouri to Kampala, Uganda. I am otherwise. I am a witness to the resurrection. All of this is my heritage and inheritance. Jesus calling for our demons to be cast out. Jesus inviting us to rise again from these tombs of our own making, born again. I am otherwise. My pronouns are they and them.
So I'll jump in at this point, if that's okay. And this poem by Chris Page has been resonating with me the last few days. Of course, it's a poem that we've been delving into for these several years that the film has been in production. And that's one of the real privileges and joys of making films. There are plenty of challenges that wouldn't necessarily be so joyful. There's some challenges, but there are also many wonderful things. And part of it is the more you work with a film, the deeper you get into the artistry and the meaning and the voices of the people that you have been interacting with and interviewing. And I had the privilege of doing the interviews. Rodney was there too and was also participating some in that. But the part that resonates with me, I am male and female, neither, both, made in the image of an otherwise God. I love the ambiguity of all of this, the symbolic qualities of this. I was asked, or we were asked, to speak somewhat to our spiritual journeys, and Rodney began that process, particularly focusing, Rodney, on your childhood and that spiritual seed within you as a child. And I've been thinking a lot about that as well. In fact, the image that has been coming to my mind is an hourglass. It's very wide at the top and gets very narrow and then gets wide again. And the wide part at the top, this is my experience, and I think it may be that of many people, that we're dropped on this planet, we're born on this planet with great curiosity, with great amazement at what we're seeing and taking in from infancy on up, as long as we have a basically caring environment. That's not disallowing that, but at least in those, especially in those initial months and years, I think in my life, I experienced awe. I can remember getting up in the morning, and it's like looking outside at these French doors here, and seeing the sunlight coming through the green, seeing the flowers, and I could hardly wait to get outside and explore, the big hill in the backyard and all that. Just full of questions. A really open, expansive place up there at the top of this hourglass. And then it seemed to me that with time, even within the first 4 or 5 years, and also included in that, I might mention, sexuality. This is well documented, the 5-year-olds and their curiosity about what their bodies are and what your body is and that whole thing. Somewhere in that period, the religiosity began to create fear and control and shame And that's where things started getting narrow. And that's where school started. And that's where so much of that curiosity and beautiful beholding of this new planet that we're on. I don't know where we came from, but here we are, you know. Well, here we are, we landed here. And wow, how amazing everything is. And then we began to be told how to think and what to think and what to say. And if you didn't say the right thing, like Mary's an apostle, right? To the office, right? Great example. Also, your statement earlier about the seed and the artist. I think the child's mind is the artist's mind. Picasso used to say he had to unlearn all of the ways he was forced to draw. And, you know, I saw some of his earlier paintings recently that were just exquisite depictions, photographic. I didn't know the man could paint like that because I had only seen his later work. Anyway, he taught himself to see through multi-perspectives at a portrait, for example. You see it, I mean, this is just one example. In other words, unlearning. So I think we go through this narrow, constricted place. And if we're fortunate, if we have some mentors and some people who care, and if we have community, because it's not just an individual journey, we can begin to, like that hourglass, begin to expand outward again and become more open and teach ourselves, like the artists, to see things in a new way, a child's way, to return to the awe. Part of what the film is about is really trying to address the ineffable. And that's one of the roles of art. And this guy here is so terrific at it. Really, this is a wonderful thing. I'm just loving working with both these folks, and we have a fourth member right now. And we've had other people that have contributed to the production of the film. But art can become the way to get back to that which is beyond our left brain analytical stuff. It gets into our right brain. It gets into the metaphorical. It gets into the otherwise. That's the creation of a poetic word that Chris has done. Capital O, capital W. We take that little word for granted. Oh, well, otherwise I'd do this. Well, think of that, otherwise. Otherwise God, other than this constricted view that many of us have been raised with. So the film is cinematic and artistic, and that's just one piece of it that you saw, Chris's poem. But there are other poems, there's animation, there's wonderful music, a lot of it original music by this guy. So it becomes representational of that which is in the territory of awe. And that awe is the wholeness, it's the bringing together of our senses, of our spirit. Part of the really toxic stuff that's gone on that's created that narrow, constricted part of the hourglass is what we call splitting. And the splitting has its roots, it goes back quite a long ways, back into the Greek culture, and that was adopted by St. Augustine and others of the church fathers, that the body is not good. The body has to be controlled. It's evil, these uncontrollable sensations and lusts and all this stuff is bad, bad, bad. But the spirit up here, where the traditional angels live, is good. Well, we decided to sort of flip that notion and to say the angels amongst us now, the messengers, are giving us a message of wholeness, of connection, of unity. And so I think I'll leave it at that. You want to add a piece here? All right. A little coughing going on here. And then we'll show you one other poem after your set.
So I believe that there are things going on behind the scenes in life that we have no clue about, and that there are people that have not yet entered into our world. Although Rodney and I have known each other through Common Ground Fellowship, I don't know how many years ago, but Vic, I didn't even know it existed. It wasn't even on my radar. And then March of 2021, Lisa Gage, who I think is part of this community, that's where I know her from, called me and she said, I have a possible PR job for you. She said, I have these friends who made this remarkable film and I don't have the time or the energy or the bandwidth to promote it. And this is right up your alley. Give them a call, get in touch with them. And God, Spirit, Universe, whatever, knew exactly what it was doing, because this film speaks to a lot of what I've experienced in my life. Since we're talking about our childhoods, I was raised Jewish in a home where my father helped, he and my mother raised us, not just as girls, but kids. And we would go to synagogue every Friday night, sometimes on Saturday mornings, sometimes on Sunday mornings, because my father was part of a Sunday morning breakfast club for the boys. My sister and I broke the gender barrier, and then our friends started coming to him. But in the conservative, not political conservative, but middle ground Jewish conservative synagogue that I grew up in the 60s and 70s, women were not counted in the minyan. Decorum that's needed of 10 people needed for saying certain prayers. Women couldn't wear a tallis, prayer shawl. Women couldn't become rabbis. So my father, sneaky subversive guy that he was, on the high holidays when I would sit next to him, he'd wrap the tallis around my shoulder while he was wearing the other side of it. And one of the rabbis, we had a revolving door rabbis in the congregation. One of the rabbis that came into the synagogue, probably when I was in my teens, was incredibly sexist. When he met my mother, she had to say, my eyes are up here. And I was 16, yeah, because I was in confirmation class. I went to synagogue, Sunday school, Hebrew school, became a bat mitzvah at 13, which meant I was an adult member of the congregation. So at 16, I was in confirmation class, and the rabbi, who rarely called on the girls to answer questions, focused on the boys, we felt like second-class citizens, said one day, I decided that in order to get confirmed, you all have to go another year. And I went, oh. And the girls all said, we're leaving. As soon as we left, the boys got confirmed. So fast forward probably 2 or 3 years, and I'm coming home from college on a Friday night, visiting my parents. And it was in April, there was a freak snowstorm. I grew up in Williamsburg, New Jersey. So you know how rare snow is in April here. And my father and my sister and I went to synagogue and we looked around and we said, okay, not enough people here to start. And then a few minutes later, probably one third person showed up. And my father said, okay, there's 10 of us now, we can start. And the rabbi said, we need 2 more men. And my father, God bless him, said, my daughters should count. And the rabbi said, that's very nice, but we still need 2 more men. Now, I appreciated that my father stood up for us, but if he really wanted to make a point, you know what he would have done? He would have left with us and said, now you need 3 more men. He wasn't willing to rock the boat that much. So for many years, I was disillusioned with Judaism. So I studied Eastern religion and I studied Native traditions, but there was still a hint of sexism in it. So that's one part of the film, is the spiritual part. The other part is sexuality. We haven't really talked a lot about that, but my mother would say when I was little, I asked lots of questions. My sister didn't have to ask them because I already asked them. They were mostly about sex and mostly about at the dinner table. So, and I have no recollection of any of this. So my father would look at my mother and say, okay, you take this one. I don't know how to answer this. So I grew up in, I would say, a touch positive family, but not necessarily, there was no sex positive education. There wasn't a whole lot. Probably when I was in college, I started thinking, okay, why is there a schism between what we're taught is spiritual and what we're taught is sexual? And I refer to myself as heteroflexible. Most of my relationships have been with men, but I've had relationships with women as well. And I say it's about the person, not the plumbing. So that's one reason why this film is so perfect, because I got to explore both aspects. Now, my sense of spirituality is very strong. I'm an interfaith minister. Love is my religion, and I don't have the right to tell anybody what to believe spiritually. And God, Goddess, all that is too vast to fit in a box. And that's what this film is about. I've seen it probably more than half a dozen times, 10 times maybe. And every time I get another hit of, oh, this is amazing. And I cry and I laugh and I nod knowingly. And I know, I knew Rev Bev before this, Beverly Dale, who you'll hear a poem from shortly. So I've known her for a number of years. And the people that are in the film are speaking from the heart. And they're talking about wholeness and bringing together whatever they were taught, sexuality. And sexuality is more than just about what goes on below the belly button. In our culture, it's, sex is get it on, get it up, get it in, get it off, get it out. And that's not what this is about. That's not what this movie is about. It's about, and I love the word ineffable. It's about the unexplainable. You know it when you feel it, right? It's here too. So think about, why do people say, oh God, we're having an orgasm? Okay, if sex isn't supposed to be spiritual. Okay, so do you want to?
Yeah, let's show the.
Okay, we're gonna show the second.
Sex is good. That's what it's called.
That's
Sex is good.
good lead in, good lead in.
So I have this poem that says, nobody told me that sex is fun. They only told me that sex is sin. Well, if fun is sin and sin is bad, then fun is bad. And if sex is fun and fun is sin, then sex is bad. But we all know that sex is joy. And we all know that God is joy. So if sex is joy and God is joy, then sex is good. Sex is good.
They live among us. They look like me and you. Something beautiful about them, like one green eye or one blue.
And the cool thing about this film is that there's something in it for everybody. We've shown it at both of your churches, and now my community here. And Rodney and I spoke, I think it was in May, at a conference, a contemporary relationships conference that took place in Austin. But through the marvels of modern technology, we were each in our own homes, and we showed the film.
Eastern Mountain.
And Eastern Mountain, our friend Rod Schichtel's community up in upstate New York, I believe is where it is. They were the first place that we showed it a year ago, May, and it was very well received. And this one at the relationships conference, there were 3 people, a lot of people gave feedback, but there were 3 of them that really stuck with us. First person said, where was this film when I was 14? The second person said, this film will save souls. The third person said, this film will save lives. So because it gives people a home, a home where they're recognized, where they're honored, where they're acknowledged. So our dream is to get this in every spiritual community that we can, every college, therapists, social workers, psychologists, medical schools, seminaries. Glenn and I were talking a bit about that, because it's going to give people a different perspective. When I was in seminary, I graduated from the new seminary in 1999. We didn't have anything like this. There wasn't any talk. I mean, there was certainly talk about inclusivity, but there wasn't a talk about the merging, the intersection of sexuality and spirituality. And what Vic was saying, children explore the world with all of their senses wide open. And it's not, we're taught there's a difference between sensuality and sexuality. And there really isn't, because the best sex is all your senses fully alive. So what I invite you to do is go out there today and enjoy your senses. But don't enjoy that, whatever that is for you. Just lying on the ground and breathing.
Well, I think, yeah, what you're saying, it's so right on, because it really is, to be whole, you
Mhm.
experience everything with
Mhm.
all of your
Yeah,
soul, all of
yeah.
your being. Like, just like we are right here. You don't have to wait till we go out in the world, we can do it right
Right,
now.
yeah.
Let's be here with your mind, your body. And so many times when I'm working with my coach, it's always funny to me, because we'll be working on something, and she'll ask me a question and I'll go, I don't know. And she goes, you're in your head.
Yeah.
Where does this sit in your body? Oh, I have to go there? I don't want to go there, but I'll go into my body and I'll, oh, it's sitting in my stomach, or it's in my chest, or it's in my shoulder, or wherever. And that the body is teaching us stuff. And just like those angels that are still, the source is still sending us messages, those messages sometimes come from our own body. It's telling us, hey, don't do that, or look out for this, or, and the other thing I was going to say, which you were talking about, always, especially that women were not allowed to be rabbis, but I think Mary was a mystic, and that was their connection. That's my own theory. I think that she was a mystic, probably practicing Kabbalah, and that was, just like Jesus, who was also a mystic. So they probably had a very special relationship.
Also, speaking of sensuality here, just looking around this room, it's a very sensual room. It's quite beautiful. The art that's here, the plants, the flowers, the symbolism, the circles, looking outside the French doors. I'm very visual, as are you folks, and my eyes just take in great beauty in your environment here. It's a pleasure to be with you. I think we want to have questions.
Yeah, one quick thing I want to add is that the movie beautifully explores the idea of sexual trauma and spiritual trauma, religious trauma. There are people that grew up being told, if you don't fit in this box, you're going to go to hell. There are people that have been sexually assaulted, sexually abused throughout their lives. So they're feeling abandoned by God. There are people that want to have a sense of spirituality, which is one of the things I love about this community, that there are no shoulds and have-tos and oughts, it's just respect. And this film brings together those two ideas. Everybody that they interviewed has a story. Every one of them has their own story with religion and their bodies and sex. One of the things that David Dunbauer, the rabbi, who's actually he's local. I don't think Lisette's local, right? But
She's from Richmond.
Rev Bev is local. M House is local. She goes to your church. Chris Page is local, and Nick is not local.
No.
But one of the things that David says that you'll see when if they show the movie here is he says something about, why do we have to hang up religion on hook when we enter into a sexual relationship, and why do we have to hang up sex when we enter a spiritual space? And so it's the best of both worlds is what you see in the film. We're not going to show the film today. If the community decides to show the film, then you'll see that. Yeah. What were you going to say?
Well, we need to move to the next
Yeah.
part of our
So
message.
questions, comments,
Yeah.
again, like Susan said, your comments and questions won't be recorded, but the people at home will hear them, and we welcome your questions.